Okay, my name is Craig Allen. I am the president of the U.S. China Business Council. U.S. China Business Council is a group of about 280 American companies, mostly multinational companies, who are invested in China. And so my job is to advocate on behalf of U.S. businesses in China. And in a way, we are sister organizations to this organization, to CGCC. And I want to be a good sister. I'd like to support Chinese investment in the United States, just as American investment in China is welcomed. So also we should welcome Chinese investment in the United States. I'd say, Mike, my initial view of the report is it's very well done. There's a lot of detail in there that I think is really very excellent. The U.S.-China Business Council also does an annual survey. You could find that on our website. And I believe, and I see many parallels between how Chinese businesses are doing in the US and how American businesses are doing in China. And those parallels are quite interesting. And so for the journalists or for the academics in the room, I think that there's a good story there about how a good year for Chinese companies in the U.S. is also a good year for American companies in China, and also vice versa. There are many parallels. There are many tensions and challenges, and also opportunities that we both face. So quite an interesting contrast, which I'm happy to explore with you later today.
A good friend.
Thank you. And this is Penn. I was supposed to sit on that chair. And, I'm here to represent CGCC as well. Craig is very correct. You're not only a sister, you're a bigger brother as well. And, I just want to echo what Craig was talking about. In today's environment, obviously, everybody knows it's a very difficult time. And everybody come here, show your interest, commit your time, all deserve a credit. And from that point of view, on behalf of CGCC, I just want to thank everyone for coming here and to support our event. Thank you.
So big round of applause for them as well. How about that? Pin, let me start with you because I went back and looked at a similar panel where you actually were sitting here and having a discussion. And we talked about the three mountains, which I thought was really interesting. One of the mountains was inflation. The other was Ukraine. And the third mountain that he referred to, of course, was the U.S.-China relationship, which has been quite tenuous of late. And I thought about that. And I thought about mountains and climbing mountains and how the difficulty of that, especially if you don't have the right Sherpa guide, kind of helping you along. But then I started thinking about other mountains, and one of them, of course, is this banking crisis. And the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said recently, he talked about the upheaval, saying it's likely to result in tighter credit conditions. So add that mountain as well. If you're a business and the economy's not doing great, and maybe you want to get a loan here or there, and that's tightening as well. Can you talk about the mountain range, not just the three mountains, and these businesses? We looked at Abby's study, and I think the interesting thing, and I'm going to ask you a similar question, because one of the things we had a chance to chat over Zoom the other day is Craig's a really optimistic guy, but right now the environment doesn't look great. So what do you say to businesses trying to navigate all this stuff? And one of the things I did like about Abby's report is that, this kind of philosophy, up cycles you do this, down cycles you do this, but all of them still pivoting in this direction, even when things don't look great. Can you talk to us about your sense of optimism, your sense as a business leader? How do you navigate all of this?
Sure. So again, let's go back to the old Chinese thing, right? no question at all, we have a crisis here. And 3 months and could be 5 months. And for example, the inflation, while we're not out there yet, I think if you look at your Twitter or you look at your WeChat, Elon Musk yesterday said we're already in a recession. I don't know if you saw that or not. So there are many different mountains here. There's no doubt. The question is that when we face in those crises, again, in the old Chinese say, crisis has two characters, right? The first one is a danger. Second one is opportunity. So now they give us the freedom to look at whichever the way, depending on how conservative you are or how positive you are. So I would say, there's no question about, those crises, other than the U.S.-China tension, which, will probably exist for a long time. Many others are global issues. It's not just USA issue, it's not Chinese issue. So it doesn't really matter you're here in the United States or you're in China or in another part of the world. You're gonna have to deal with it. So now coming back to the USA only, right? That's what we are probably facing more significantly. Clearly, Craig also said there's a lot of parallel between the US CBC and the CGCC survey. One of the interesting, data shows both sides survey, more than 80% of companies are very concerned about the US-China relationship. However, from those survey also shows majority of those companies are still going to do the normal course of business, which is a very positive. And that clearly tells us that the business logic still prevail. When I got here this morning, actually this afternoon, I got in the taxi and I was asking the driver, I said, Jesus, this is cold here in DC. And he said, no, that's not that bad. I say, I was kind of freezing. I thought Chicago was cold enough. He said, yeah, it is, but it's not the temperature. He said, you feel cold because the wind. So now I think that's interesting for our business. The temperature is still there, okay? The temperature is there. The business logic is still there, and the business opportunities are still there. Now the question is how cold you can feel due to those wind blow. So now I'm coming from Chicago. Chicago is a windy city, right? So the wind blow all the time. So the question is, how do we deal this wind? And I always say, the best way to deal with wind is try not to deal with it. If you try to deal with it, you will never be able to catch it. You will never be able to manage that. And if you focus on what you're supposed to do, then you should survive well. This is what Warren Buffett say, right? When people are getting scared, you should be greedy. So this is the time.
You mentioned Windy City, you mentioned wind, made me think about the winds of change, which is that Sherry told me before you start, make sure to mention that the Chinese delegation is here, and I completely forgot it. So can you give them a warm welcome, big hand of applause? They've arrived as well.
Yeah, especially for them to be able to get a visa. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, boy, that's a whole nother session, isn't it? So Craig, I don't know if you have, I know you're a good big sister, in some respects a big brother. You're definitely a family member here, but are you an advice columnist too? Any kind of advice about hiking gear or, these businesses? Because you're in the business community. It doesn't matter if you're in China or the United States, there's always headwinds. He was just talking about winds. Any suggestions or remedies or thoughts?
I'd like to add my voice of welcome to all of the Chinese delegation. We hope that you have a very successful trip, that you're able to find good partners and able to put down roots for the longer term. I would like to agree with Pien. You won't find us disagreeing very much, perhaps, but from a little bit of a different perspective. I think that fundamentally the economies of Russia, of China and the United States are both very strong. With regard to China, we see good growth in the first half of 2023. And according to the International Monetary Fund, China will produce about a third of global growth in 2023. And all of our companies want to be a part of that growth, want to contribute also to that growth. And I would say that the US economy goes through cycles, but especially for all of our visitors, you can be confident that the fundamentals of the US economy are very strong, and that this economy will continue to grow despite the ups and downs over the longer term. So there are many opportunities to invest in the US. And I think that especially when an investment brings in, produces a product that is otherwise exported from China to the United States, that it should be warmly welcomed by mayors and governors across the United States. When you look at US history, maybe the history of any country, you find that oftentimes there's a large trade deficit, and that deficit is corrected by internal foreign direct investment. In the United States, we have welcomed foreign direct investment since for the 270 years that we've been a nation. In the 1970s, there was quite a bit of tension with Japan because of a bilateral trade deficit. And then due to investment, that tension has completely gone away. Similarly, in the 80s and the 90s, there was tension because of a very large trade deficit with Korea. And again, in large part, that was corrected by foreign direct investment by Korean companies in the United States. And so I think that foreign direct investment is the economically rational way to address a trade deficit, and that it is, I won't say inevitable, because nothing is inevitable, but it is important that those economic processes carry through, and that your investments in China, in the United States, are welcome and are successful over the longer term. We welcome you to put down roots. We welcome you to hire Americans. We welcome you to contribute to our tax base. We welcome you to contribute brands and know-how and technology in our country, just as American companies have done in China.
And it's interesting, one of the things you get to do when you are in my profession is you get to go and moderate sessions like this. So I've done quite a few. In September of 2012, I was moderating a panel discussion in Dallas, Texas, at the Cowboys Stadium, huge sprawling locale. And some of the guests that I was interviewing at the time was the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, and the governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. And I think if you ask both of them right now, they deny that they were ever at that event. But at the time, they were pitching, boy, it'd be great, bring those investment dollars to Florida, bring those investment dollars to Wisconsin. I met the mayor of Green Bay. I'll bring those investment dollars. Arlington, Texas, bring those investment dollars. They were really spending very bullish on bringing foreign direct investment into their communities. And we've seen the benefits. So you just talked about it. And BYD, I think, is a striking example. I brought it up before. And I mean, I know Lancaster, California. I mean, it was just a blot on the land. You drove through it to somewhere else, and now it's changed dramatically. Are we still seeing that where perhaps because there's all these fights up here on the subnational level, the relationships are still kind of strong and steady because in local communities, local states, people recognize the benefits of having foreign direct investment?
Yeah, I would say this is a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street, right? So I had a lunch with Governor Walker, That was right before pandemic, I think. And during the election, he was one of the candidate on the Republican side, right? So he was, he said what he has to say. And but on the other side, when I met with someone, we had a lunch, and it was in Milwaukee. He talked just like us, frankly speaking. So at the end, it's all about the business. But business is not just about the money, let's put it this way. Business is all about how do you build the ecosystem that everybody can get a benefit out of that. So that is going back to your previous panel, I think Kurt mentioned the one word about the community. And Craig just mentioned the one word about the root. And I, believe that we have a lot of work to do as a Chinese investment in the United States. And investing is good. It's a business decision. But beyond the business, how can we be part of the local economy? That's probably a real study, a challenge that we all have to learn. And I called, it's not only we can physically come here, but we need to be able to be here to speak in the local language. When I say local language, it's not just the English, right? It's the law, it's the rule, it's the transparency, working with the union. There's many different things that we need to learn. Some of us learn it in the hard way. Some of us are lucky, got help from, various advisors. Many of them are here and helped many of our companies in the past. So I think, to us, the deeper you are in the community, deeper you are this root, right? The deeper the root we are, and the better we can handle the storm. That's has been proved many times. And I always joke about, many times people say, hey, you're a Chinese company. I always joke back and I say, define me what a Chinese company mean, right? Many of us here probably, educated in China, born in China, raised in China, educated in China. But today, those people are holding American passport, paying American tax, voting for American president. So are they Chinese or are they American? Same thing with the business. It's not about where you come from. It's more about what do you do here. So as long as, as Greg say, you pay more tax, you hire more people, you invest more money, you really contributed to the local community. There's nothing wrong to be here in the United States, and the opportunity are there. I think the survey already told us, everybody believes the opportunity is still there. We just need to be able to navigate it through. And I think, again, I'm probably a little too naive, but I still feel that it is a time for us to keep investing.
It's okay to be naive. I mentioned early on, I wanted to be this bridge builder, and Craig was laughing when I was saying there's all these holes in the bridge and stuff. But I think that's one thing that I think all of us share is an optimism and the sense that this relationship is so important both ways. Craig's talking about Americans going to China and vice versa. And I remember talking to Jimmy Carter years ago, and he talked about how he got this phone call, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and they only wake you up then as the nuclear codes or something. So you're kind of scrambling and you're barely awake, and it's Deng Xiaoping. And he wanted to talk to him about, I want to send all these kids over to colleges in the United States. But this people-to-people exchanges has been so vitally important. I'm going back to 2012 and the golden age of relations between China and the US. We've kind of seen it go south. But I still believe strongly. In fact, I heard a Chinese diplomat say this one time, and I think it's really something we should think about. He said, I can see a time in the future where the president of the United States went to Harvard and the president of China went to Harvard, and they were in the same class together. I can see that time in the future. Now, that may be folly, but I think his point was that, you have people going back and forth, and we're learning so much about each other, which is really good for all of us. You're an optimistic guy. How do you see, clearly things have gotten off the rails, but what are your thoughts moving forward? Because obviously you're in this space. It's important to you, just as it is to him and to me as well. What more needs to be done, or what are your thoughts, or how do we get back to being the optimistic people we once were?
Let me first offer some reflections on Peen's comments. I think that for American companies in China, that there are great opportunities. I returned from Hong Kong about 3 weeks ago and had a visit to Guangzhou and met with Guangzhou officials and Guangdong officials. And the welcome mat is very warm and thick. There are so many opportunities in the Greater Bay Area, and indeed throughout all of Guangdong province. And I think that the same is true here, that there are incentives and a lot of people who are happy to help Chinese companies find the appropriate home in the United States. At the local level and at the provincial level, there's a great deal of enthusiasm for additional investment, trade, technology transfer, and expanding people-to-people relations. So while at the central government level, things are a little bit more complicated, I'm confident that province to province, province to state, or city to city, that there is a lot of activity that carries on. And certainly at the corporate level, I'm willing to bet most, if not all, of our Chinese guests taking part in Select USA, looking at investments in the United States, also trade heavily with the United States. And that's a good thing. We welcome both the trade and the investment. And despite the tariffs, despite the rhetoric, trade has maintained a very stable increase, certainly over the last 4 years. And I think that that should give us some hopes that we will be able to continue the economic foundations strongly going forward. I must say that the next 6 months will be very important. President Biden will be hosting APEC on November 14, November 15 in San Francisco. And at that time, he will welcome President Xi Jinping to San Francisco. And I think that all of the 21 APEC members will be looking at the two of them and wondering, well, how's this going? And both want it to go well. That's an important meeting for both sides. And I suspect that over the next 6 months, there will be quite intense diplomacy between Beijing and Washington that I hope will benefit companies, tourists, students, academics, media, journalists, all of those bridges that bring us together. So, Mike, I think that you make a great bridge. But some of the bridges that we have built over the last 50 years, some of them, maybe they need a little repair. Some bridges, you sometimes need a little bit of maintenance, perhaps even overhaul. And so I think that this is a good opportunity not to take the relationship for granted, but to maintain and repair those bridges, many of which are 50 years old and could need an upgrade. And hopefully within the next 6 months, before President Xi and President Biden sit down together in San Francisco, we'll be able to have witnessed an improvement, a stabilization, and a firmer foundation for this bilateral relationship. The International Monetary Fund has done very interesting work on potential decoupling. And they have noted in a recent report that if the United States and China decouple as much as 2% of global economic growth will be lost. That's a lot. 2% of global economic growth is very, very significant. We should not decouple. We should trade with each other. We should invest with each other. We should find the value that we have known for so long within this relationship, protect it while, of course, taking care of our national security needs. That can be done, and indeed it must be done in a manner that benefits the people of China and the people of the United States. And so the next 6 months will be important in the bridge repair business.
So Pin, just to kind of talk about our panel discussion, I want to read it, Navigating the Complexities of U.S.-China Bilateral Investment Opportunities and Challenges. And I want to talk about one of the challenges, and I want to be introspective. And I think that's journalism. Because it's interesting listening to what BYD is doing and some of the interesting things that they're doing, but that's not a story that really I've read in a lot of places. I did see you on 60 Minutes. You were fantastic. That was many years ago. And I just want to talk about a story that I did, I think it was 2018. It was before the pandemic. I went out to California. There was a manufacturing facility, and they'd grown the workforce 6 times since they took over. But this was a manufacturing facility that was a mom and pop operation, family owned. The parents die, the young kids, all they want to do is just get rid of this thing. It needs all these repairs and stuff. In comes foreign direct investment. The new leader comes in and says, look, we're going to have to repair this thing, but it's going to be the long haul. We got to put in all these. And then they start building and building, ramping up. And of course, you know that as a tax base, it's there. They're providing employment. And so we did the story, but you don't see those stories in U.S. media. But you do see tensions between the United States and China. They're spiraling out of control. It's always negative, negative, negative. And I guess my question is to you, because I think it was a good point made in our previous discussion that, you know, if you're in business and you're from China, maybe you want to kind of hide in the bushes, you know, just kind of do your job, but just kind of maybe stay out. But those stories have got to get out. How do you break through the clutter? And how important is for those stories to be out there resonating? Because I think people don't say, you know what, this Chinese foreign direct investment, it's really helping my community. This is a good thing. You don't hear a lot of people saying that.
So we're going to count on you.
I'm doing my part, but no, but what do you think needs to happen to break
yeah.
through the clutter? Because it's so much negativity.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a nature of, you know, our society, right? The news, the good news is not the news. Only the bad news is the news. So, you know, on one side, I know many of, I just will be very honest, you know, when we talk about Select USA, right? Half of the people here have already selected USA. Another half is on the way coming here to Select USA. But the question today is, I don't think Select USA is a topic. The topic is that, could we sustain in the United States? Could we survive in the United States? Or could we even be selected by the United States, right? That is the question many of our members getting very frustrated and bothered by it, right? So to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of things we should do, we could do, but going to the common sense, unfortunately, you know, this is not a typical news, right? You know, so we, you know, event like this, for example, Greg joining us, you know, last year we have others and everybody here, you know, we're all contributing. We're all in the same ecosystem. And I would say, you know, Greg mentioned the Biden administration said it many times. This is about the de-risk, not the decoupling. So as long as it's not about decoupling, then in the Chinese word, I can see that in Chinese, 流水不腐. Flowing water will not decay. So the question, again, I'm translating what Craig was just talking about. We should let the flow start, the flow come through. People's flow, capital flow, technology flow. You talk about journalists, you talk about students. Both sides have a lot more to do. If we allow those flow come through, then business will thrive by itself, and the community will get a benefit by itself. But if we want to put a wall, burn down the bridge or whatever, then there's no flow, then everything stops. That become dead water. The dead water will smell. I tell you the truth. No matter where you go on this planet, the dead water will smell. The only flowing water, will bring the future, bring the hope. So I think, our job is trying to promote those bilateral communication, bilateral, flow. So that's what I think at least we can do. And actually we're, our members are doing them every day.
Well, you mentioned 2%. I mean, that's such a staggering number when you look at world GDP. And again, I think it's one of those things that just doesn't resonate. Somehow those stories aren't getting out. What more can be done, do you think? And it can't all be on me, like he says.
So I do think it's a very interesting question. Also, just reflecting on a International Monetary Fund report out today that U.S. China decoupling or decoupling around the world will have a especially bad impact on the poorest countries in Africa. And so I refer you to an IMF, the IMF blog of today for that story. In the US, there are approximately 1.1 million Americans who are employed by exporting to China. And in addition to that, we have all of the American employees of CGCC companies. And all of those jobs are important. Every single one is important. And I think that the way that I look at this is that it is a small number and it should grow. Let's take the example of travel. I think everyone, as you joked, Mike, should be congratulated for getting a visa. But I think also you should be congratulated for getting an airplane seat. It's not easy to travel between the United States and China now. We had 330 flights every week pre-COVID, and this week we will have about 22 flights, so less than 10%. And the lack of face-to-face has been really hurtful to the bilateral relationship. The fact that our government leaders and our business leaders could not visit with each other has really hurt in a deep way, hard to quantify, but I think felt by everyone. And now that we are beyond the COVID era and we are beginning to be able to travel again, I think that it's useful to get face-to-face as often as possible, particularly in our government. And I would say particularly more important than anything else would be military to military, uniform to uniform. That interaction, direct face-to-face, is something that will certainly improve the overall tension within the bilateral relationship. On our side, when I work with a congressman or a senator, I would always want to know who are the companies, which are the companies in their state or their district that are exporting to China? How much are they exporting to China? How many jobs are involved in those exports? And I especially like small and medium-sized companies, niche companies that perhaps make a unique product that they have been selling into China. Alternatively, importing from China, creating growth in their city or town. And ideally, I like to be able to, when talking to a government official, be able to tell them about a company that they know about in their congressional district or state, to make it personal. All of those jobs are important, and there are many more of them available to us if we could get the politics right, and if we could get our economic policies right. And that is what I hope our two leaders will be working on. Certainly, I know our diplomats are focused on that over the next 6 months. This is a golden time to get some things done. And I'm hopeful that all of our Chinese guests are really here at the right time before Xi Jinping and Joe Biden meet November 15th to hopefully put a better foundation under this bilateral relationship.
Craig, I won't put you on the spot, but boy, you were able to get on one of those 22 flights to go over to China. That's pretty amazing. I don't know if you had to muscle people out of the way to get that ticket, but give me the sense of what it's like, because one of the things I love about going to China is just that face-to-face, the meals, too much excessive adult beverages and additional adult beverages, perhaps too many of those, which I avail myself of a lot of the time when I'm in China. But there is so much to be said about that face-to-face, that personal relationship. And I think that's the other thing that kind of drove a wedge. We talk about the relationships between the two governments, but I think also the pandemic, it's just different doing a Zoom meeting. We had one the other day, the three of us. It's just so much different sitting here with you guys versus doing a Zoom. Talk to me about what it was like to finally get a chance to go back.
Well, I think that the recovery in China, the post-COVID bump, is very evident. We should have all bought luxury stocks 6 months ago, because the luxury goods sales are doing very well. Hotels, among our members, I was told that hotel occupancy in China is up around 90%. The biggest problem is finding workers in many of the service industries. So we see, I think, a very healthy recovery in the Chinese economy, and a great deal of confidence that this recovery will be sustainable over certainly the medium and the longer term. And so I think that that confidence is really fascinating and wonderful. And the American companies who are in China also feel that level of confidence, and definitely feel that they want to be there for the longer term. I think that if you are let me put this very simply. If you are a Chinese multinational and you want to be a global leader, you need to be a global leader in America. If you are an American company and you want to be a global leader, then you need to be a leader in China. These are the two biggest economies in the world. They will be the rest, they will remain the two biggest economies in the world for the rest of our lifetimes. We have to succeed in both markets, and we have to not only welcome, but celebrate the achievement of other companies in each other's markets. We can welcome each other. We can learn from each other. And indeed, we will both be not only wiser, but wealthier if we keep our markets open and keep trade and keep investment on a growing path. And we could decouple, it is possible, but we would both be poorer for it. And I think not only poorer, but more unequal. That is not something that we should aspire to. And indeed, it is something that we should prevent.
One of the things that Abby mentioned was this kind of dual approach. So many of these Chinese companies have one leg in the United States, another leg in China. To your point, if you want to be a global leader, you really have to be in both markets. Any advice you'd give the folks sitting here who've heard a lot of, the negatives of late, the economy and, all these other issues? Is it just have that vision, kind of stick to it, hunker down? I mean, what advice would you give to business leaders here about the right approach moving forward? I mean, we hear so much about, the recession's coming. You mentioned Elon Musk. I'm not sure a lot of people take stock in what he says these days. I would not invest in Twitter like he did, but that's his objective. He's got a lot more money than I do. But your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, business by itself has its own logic, right? So, that one, everybody is here probably know better than any other people for their own business. But the one thing I would say for sure is that let's not give up yet. I'm talking about this US-China relationship. Let's not give it up yet. And again, this morning I'm coming to DC and there was a headwind. The headwind will slow you down. The headwind will cause more fuels, but the headwind is not going to change the direction. And 20 years ago, we were here probably more like a panda. Everybody like us, and we're cute, lovely, and representing another part of the world. But today, I don't know what's the best I can use. Maybe skunk. But even we're a minority today, again, you look at the mainstream, both in China and the United States, the poll shows about both countries, 80% of the general population view negatively about the other country, right? So clearly we're a minority here, but that's okay. I think, eventually the history will tell we were right. And, what we're doing here is not good, only good for us, but also good for our next generation, for this two country, and also for this world. So from that perspective, let's stay together, let's work together. There are going to be a lot of issues. That's why we are here together for. We're going to be, stay together and to try to solve those issues together. And as long as, back to Michael, what do you say? We don't have the voice. We're not on the news, only if when it's bad. But let's do good. Like, many Chinese companies did a PPP, whatever, during the COVID. There was millions of, those masks were imported in the United States. And I remember, we see the overwhelmed welcome from a local community. That's really, I think, where we belong to, is the community. And maybe, at the federal level, we're viewed differently. But as long as we stay with the community, we connected with the community, we invest in the community, I think that's our own community. And it's not about the US-China. It's all about the human nature. It's our own community. I think we should be able to, again, there's a headwind, slow us down, cost more money, that's okay. But as long as we stay together, I think we will be there.
Well, we're going to leave on that hopeful note. I can't thank both of you enough. Really great insights. Give them a big round of applause. Why don't you?